So you're prepping for a translation agency manager interview. Well, we've got this deep dive into some RoleCatcher resources. They can really help you nail it. Think of this as your cheat sheet, so you can understand what those hiring managers are looking for and how to make yourself stand out as the perfect candidate.
It's not just about having the right answers. You need to showcase yourself as the perfect fit for this role.
Exactly. Think of it as learning to speak the language of interview success. And to help us translate all of that, we've got the RoleCatcher Career Guide for translation agency managers and some intel on their AI tools.
I think those can really give you an edge. Let's start by setting the scene a little bit. You're stepping into a role that's much more than just being fluent in different languages. It's about leading teams, fine-tuning projects, being the guardian of quality. It's like conducting a whole orchestra of language experts.
And the RoleCatcher Guide does a great job of laying all of that out, what it actually looks like day to day. It even breaks down the career path, from translator all the way up the ladder to manager.
Which is so helpful when you're thinking about your own experience. Even if you haven't been a manager before, you've probably gained tons of valuable experience at the different stages. That directly applies to this job. Were you a translator, a senior translator, maybe a project manager? Each step honed skills that you can really showcase now.
And speaking of honing skills, RoleCatcher's AI can actually analyze your resume and highlight those skills that are most relevant to this specific translation agency manager position. It's like having a personal tailor for your application.
I love that analogy. Speaking of tailoring, let's look at some common interview questions and how to make your answers stand out. One of the first ones you'll probably hear is, can you tell us about your previous experience managing a translation agency?
Okay, so that one seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But they're not just looking for a chronological list of your jobs.
Right. They want to know, do you truly grasp what this role is all about? That's where that RoleCatcher guide is really helpful. Use it to weave in those specifics about a translation agency manager's core responsibilities.
So instead of just saying, I manage projects, you can say, I oversaw a team of 10 translators, and I ensured quality control and make sure we followed client-specific style guides. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. And don't forget to showcase those transferable skills. Even if you haven't managed a translation agency before, I bet you've managed projects, led teams, or dealt with clients in other roles.
That's where RoleCatcher's AI can really help you connect the dots. It can pinpoint skills from those past roles that might not scream translation agency, but are absolutely relevant to this job. You can emphasize those connections in your answer, showing them you're ready to hit the ground running.
Now, another question they might ask you is, how do you ensure quality control in the translation process?
Okay, this is where your inner perfectionist can shine. It's about showcasing that dedication to accuracy, but going beyond just the mechanics of language.
Exactly. Remember what we said about the guide emphasizing cultural sensitivity? That's so important. Think back to your experience. Have you ever caught a subtle cultural nuance? That could have caused a major miscommunication.
Oh, a good story there would really make you memorable. Don't just tell them you value quality control. Really describe those systems you've used. Maybe you implemented style guides, multiple rounds of review, worked closely with native speakers. Paint that picture of your meticulous approach.
And here's a pro tip. RoleCatcher has specific skill guides that delve deeper into specific areas. So let's say you mention using style guides to ensure consistency. You could then mention a specific skill from RoleCatcher, like follow translation quality standards, to really show you're not just throwing around buzzwords.
It's like adding footnotes to your interview, showing you've really done your homework. All right, ready for another question?
Bring it on.
How do you ensure projects are completed on time and within budget? This is where those project management muscles really come into play.
Yeah, the RoleCatcher guide talks about the importance of project management software. Are you familiar with any bonus points if you can mention one specific to the translation industry?
And don't just tell them you're organized. Give them a highlight reel of your project management skills. Think about a really challenging project you navigated successfully. What strategies did you use to keep everything on track, on time, and within budget?
Be prepared for them to dig a little deeper too. They might ask about a time a project went totally off the rails and how you managed to get it back on track. These follow-up questions are all about testing your problem-solving skills under pressure.
And guess what? RoleCatcher has you covered here too. They have this AI-powered interview simulator. So you can practice answering these tricky situational questions. It's like having a sparring partner for your interview.
Okay, ready to tackle another one?
Absolutely, let's hear it.
Can you describe a time when you had to resolve conflict with a client or a team member? Every manager needs to be a diplomat. This question is all about how you handle conflict resolution.
Okay, this is what's called a behavioral question. They're trying to predict your future behavior based on your past actions. So remember to focus on active listening. Did you really try to understand the other person's perspective? What specific steps did you take to find a solution?
And RoleCatcher's AI can give you some great feedback here. It can analyze your answer, looking for those key words related to effective conflict resolution, like communication, empathy, negotiation, compromise. It's like having a linguistic detective on your side, fine-tuning your language to make sure you hit the mark.
So you're not just saying, I resolved the conflict. You're saying, I actively listened to both parties. I identified the root cause of the disagreement and facilitated a compromise that addressed everyone's concerns.
Exactly. You're painting that picture of you as a calm, collected, solution-oriented leader.
I know we've only scratched the surface here, but I'm already feeling more confident.
Me too. We're just getting started. We have a few more key questions to cover to really make sure you S this interview. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll dive back in with some more insider tips and strategies.
All right, let's jump back into those interview questions. They often want to get a sense of how you handle a bunch of things at once. So be ready for something like, how do you manage multiple projects simultaneously?
Ah, the classic juggling act. This is where your organizational superpowers get to shine.
Right. Think about those systems you use to stay on top of everything. Maybe you're a master of to-do lists, or a calendar whiz,
Oh, yeah.
or a project management software guru.
Yeah, whatever your method is, paint that picture for them. Don't just say, I prioritize. Give a specific example like, when I'm faced with multiple deadlines, I first assess the urgency and scope of each project. Then I allocate my time and resources accordingly. And of course, ensure clear communication with all stakeholders. And since we're talking about staying on top of things, be ready for a question about staying current with the industry. Something like, how do you stay up to date with industry trends and new technologies in translation?
So this is where you can show them you're a lifelong learner, always curious and eager to expand your knowledge.
Think about those specific resources that you rely on. Do you have any favorite industry publications or blogs? Do you attend any conferences or workshops? Do you love those webinars about the latest translation technology?
And RoleCatcher actually has a whole section on professional development in their career guide, so you can pull some inspiration from there. And their AI can also recommend some additional resources tailored to your interests and your career goals.
Oh, it's like having a personalized reading list for career success.
Okay, ready for another question that's almost guaranteed to come up?
Leave me with it.
How do you ensure that translations are culturally appropriate and sensitive? This one is so important. A single cultural misstep can have huge consequences.
You're right. And remember what that RoleCatcher guide said about the importance of cultural awareness. This is where it really comes into play. You need to show them. You're not just translating words, you're bridging those cultural gaps.
Exactly. Think back to your experience. Have you worked on projects where you had to adapt the language for different cultural contexts? Have you collaborated with translators from diverse backgrounds?
Share those specific examples that highlight your sensitivity to those nuances. And if you've implemented any specific processes to ensure cultural appropriateness, definitely mention those.
Yeah, maybe you've built a network of cultural consultants. Or maybe you use translation memory software. That flags potentially insensitive language.
Those details show them you're serious about cultural sensitivity, and you take those proactive steps to ensure it.
All right, let's tackle one more question that often pops up in these interviews. How do you manage client relationships and ensure client satisfaction?
This one's all about showing them you're not just a language expert, you're a relationship builder.
Think about the core values of good client management: clear communication, responsiveness, proactive problem solving. But don't just list them. Back them up with a compelling story.
Yeah, tell them about a time you went above and beyond for a client. Maybe you anticipated their needs before they even voiced them. Or maybe you turned a really challenging situation into a really positive outcome.
And remember, RoleCatcher's AI can analyze your responses to these behavioral questions and give you that targeted feedback. It can help you identify those areas where you can strengthen your answer and really showcase those client management skills.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something that the RoleCatcher guide goes into, the different stages of a career in a translation agency. Understanding that progression can really help you articulate how your experience aligns with this particular manager role.
I love that part. It's like peeking behind the curtain of the industry.
Yeah, so it usually starts with that translator role. At this stage, you're laser focused on accuracy, capturing not just the words, but the meaning and the context and the style of the original text.
You're also juggling those tasks, like researching terminology, collaborating with clients, making sure you've nailed their specific needs. Oh, and let's not forget about the technology. Translation tools and software are your best friend.
Then you might progress to a senior translator role. And here you start taking on more responsibility, maybe mentoring those junior translators, or maybe leading smaller projects.
And this is where the lines get a little blurry between a senior translator and a project manager.
Exactly. A senior translator might oversee parts of a project, while a project manager is responsible for the whole thing, from the planning and budgeting to the execution and quality control.
So when you're answering those interview questions about your experience, be mindful of that distinction. Clearly articulate the level of responsibility you held and the skills you honed at each stage.
Now let's loop back to how RoleCatcher can be your secret weapon. Throughout this whole process, their AI isn't just about analyzing your answers. It can help you tailor your resume to highlight those key experiences and skills that align with each stage of that career path.
It's like having a career GPS, guiding you toward that translation agency manager destination.
Speaking of destinations, let's explore some of the challenges and opportunities that come with this role. Because let's be real, it's not always a smooth translation.
The RoleCatcher Guide doesn't sugarcoat things. It talks about the intense competition, the tight deadlines, and the constant pressure to deliver top-notch work.
Yeah, it's a fast-paced environment, so you really need to be adaptable, resourceful, and a master of juggling those priorities. And in an industry that's constantly evolving, continuous learning isn't just a nice to have, it's essential.
That's where RoleCatcher can help. Their platform keeps you updated on the latest trends and technologies. It's like having a personalized newsfeed for your career.
Speaking of personalized, their AI can even help you identify skills that you might not realize you have. Maybe you've got a background in marketing or customer service. Those experiences could be surprisingly relevant to managing a translation agency.
It's all about connecting the dots and showing how your unique background brings something valuable to the table. And RoleCatcher's AI can help you articulate that connection in a way that resonates with hiring managers.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. Cultural sensitivity. It's so crucial in this role. It deserves a little extra attention.
For sure. The RoleCatcher Guide really hammers home that point. It's not just about avoiding cultural blunders. It's about proactively promoting cultural understanding.
Think of it as being a cultural ambassador, making sure that every translation reflects not just the words, but the spirit and the intent behind them.
And they even have some really practical advice on how to achieve this, like building a diverse team of translators, utilizing technology to help with cultural adaptation, and creating that really robust quality control process that includes cultural sensitivity checks at every stage.
It's like having a cultural sensitivity checklist built right into your workflow.
So as you're preparing for that interview, make sure to highlight your understanding of cultural nuances and your commitment to promoting cultural sensitivity in every project.
So I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but I hope you're walking away with a really good understanding of what it takes to be a successful translation agency manager, and that you've got a toolbox full of strategies to help you ace that interview.
And remember, you don't have to navigate this journey alone. RoleCatcher is there every step of the way with their resources and AI-powered tools to help you shine. From prepping your resume to practicing your answers, they've got you covered.
So to wrap things up, I want to leave you with this final thought. The translation industry is all about bridging gaps, connecting people, making communication flows seamlessly across cultures. And that's what you'll be doing as a translation agency manager.
Leading a team of talented individuals, orchestrating those projects, and ensuring that language is a force for understanding, not a barrier. It's a challenging role, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
So go out there, embrace the challenge, and use everything you've learned today to really make your mark on the world of translation